So the thing that we tend to do with people with dementia is because you have family members that don't understand their brain is dying, neighbors, members at church, you'll have people come up and try to quiz your loved one. One of the number one things said to a person with dementia is, do you know who I am? Now, Lindsay, you ever been at a party where somebody you met once years and years ago comes up and says, hey, you know who I am?
Yeah.
And you know the panic that came over you?
Yes,
The
I'm
sense of,
familiar.
oh my God, why don't I remember this person? And you begin to hem and haw. You begin to, oh, well, hi, how you doing? Yeah, how is everything? And the whole time you're saying these socially acceptable lines, your brain is desperately trying to find the file that has this person in it, if that person even meant enough to get in a file. And so it makes us panic. And that person did it very calmly over a party. They weren't right in your face demanding you tell me who I am. And there's an edge to it. We don't do this to people with any other form of disease. We don't demand they prove to us their lungs can't work. We don't put this pressure on them to do something. Your loved one has dementia, and I can promise that right now in this moment, their brain is doing the best it can. Now, that doesn't mean that later on there could be a sudden chemical surge this afternoon, and for 30 minutes, they seem like a different person. But dementias are progressive diseases, and they never stop until the end of life comes. So please don't allow family members to come up and quiz your loved one. The correct approach to a person with dementia is actually from the front, moving directly into the eyes. They begin to lose vision to where they only see this much of you. I've got to come directly towards that right eye. I have to slow down, and my greeting is, Mom, it's me, Tam. I'm your favorite one. I'm the good-looking one. I'm the smart one. I'm the one you always liked best. And in doing that, Lindsay, I've used humor. I've used social skills. I've told her who I am. I'm not threatening. I'm laughing. And because I did it that way, one final time, I might get to see my mother with the vacancy in her eyes gone and know that in that flash, she knew me. But she at least understood I'm somebody friendly. That's much, much different than tell me who I am, who's in this picture, and quizzing a loved one. And we simply have to train our families to stop doing that because it's so incredibly disrespectful. Okay, off we go to what memory is and how memory works. Now, before we start this, I want everybody to remember there are things here that are hard to hear. There are things that may make you feel like you have not done your job as a caregiver well, or that you've done something bad. What you need to remember is that human beings as a whole, we do the best we can at the time with what we know and understand. And when you understand the disease better, you make better decisions as a caregiver. You become a better caregiver because you understand now why they do those things. So as we go through this, if you need to stop and take a deep breath, we'll practice that right now. The meditative breath is that we're going to breathe in through the nose to the count of 4, hold that breath to the count of 2. We're going to breathe out to the count of 6. We're going to breathe out longer than we breathed in to help the body slow its respiration down. As we go through this stuff, Lindsay, this can really make your blood pressure get up. This can make your heart rate go. And I want families to understand how to slow down. If you can get your breathing down to 13 breaths per minute, that's meditative or prayer state. And that's important for caregivers to know. It takes a few minutes for you to do that. But right now, we're going to practice with 4 deep breaths. You're going to have your feet flat on the floor, your hands resting lightly, palm up in your hands. This is for circulation. You can shut your eyes if you want to, and I'm going to be the counter. So we're going to take 4 deep breaths in, hold them for 2, breathe out to 6 to get everybody prepared to relax, because I'm going to tell you to take a deep breath a couple of times this morning. So everybody shut your eyes and deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Last time, deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, hold, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, because we're talking about memory today, I want you to be able to remember this information. And the original handout that I sent Lindsay, called the Itty Bitty Dementia handout, was about 100 pages long, and it actually doesn't include this information. So I have a larger handout that I am going to send to Lindsay, and then she is going to get it out to you. And that handout is going to contain the information today. It's also going to contain some of the slides, including a filled out file cabinet and a blank file cabinet for you to work on about your loved one, to help you understand how they're what's happening to their thought process. And that'll make sense in just a minute. So let's start with, what is memory? We have short-term memory, long-term memory, and sensory memory. Long-term memory is divided into procedural or implicit memory, episodic memory, explicit or declarative memory, and semantic memory. And what in the world does that mean? This is what it means. Memory, Lindsay, in case anybody stops you on the street today and asks you, memory is your ability to retrieve, recall, or store information. And the way the brain stores that information is you come into memory because of sensory. Very, very young, early in your life, Lindsay, somebody said to you, sweetheart, don't touch that, it's hot, and you touched it anyway, and you found out instantly what hot meant, and you stored that memory from short-term memory over into lifetime memory. You actually stored that memory all the way down in episodic memories, where emotions are associated with events, because when any of us think of getting burned, we get emotional about it. It hurts. You have short-term memory. Short-term memory is the hippocampus and the limbic system in the brain deciding whether or not the information around you is something you need for a lifetime or something you need for only a few seconds or a few minutes. Even information like a week, a day, or a month from now starts, as always, in short-term memory. Short-term memory is what you use when you get back on the highway to go somewhere. Short-term memory says, watch out, that truck's coming up too fast on your left. That guy should be in the right lane anyway. Uh-oh, he's changing lanes. Look, that red car in front of you is about to stop. You've got to move lanes and change. Oh, cop. Short-term memory is doing a lot of work. That's why when you get home, Lindsay, you don't even remember if you stopped at the stop sign. It's because you stopped, you did what you were supposed to do. Your short-term memory said, we don't need that information anymore. We know how to stop, and you moved on home. Lifetime memory is the big one. It includes declarative events. Declarative events are the things that are, I think of them as the things we learned in school. What is the capital of the state of Texas? What is the capital of the state of Colorado? Declarative memories are then divided into semantic events and to episodic events. Semantic events are the things that are not personal. This is logic, numbers, words, meanings, concepts, facts, what you know about people in general. Episodic events are the episodes where the memory involves you, the who, what, where, when, why, how memory, emotions that are associated with events, facts and concepts about those things. Lifetime memory is also divided into procedural memory, and this is the memory that you are watching your loved one lose that is very frustrating. Procedural memory includes the activities of daily living. The activities of daily living, Lindsay, that the way I remember it, it's everything I did this morning. I woke up and I transferred from a lying to a sitting to a standing position. I then ambulated to the toilet. I did my bathing, my grooming, my dressing, my eating. Those 7 things are the activities of daily living. Those things are dozens and dozens of steps, and our loved ones begin to lose those pieces and pieces and pieces at a time. And so as your loved one loses memory, you begin to see these different types of memory affected. And what most people will notice first is that short-term memory begins to be affected. And the way that we know this is your loved one begins to ask you a lot of questions that are the very same questions they asked you just a few minutes ago. Is that making sense so far? Lindsay has to click on and then come in and say, yes, it's making sense.
Yes, it's making sense.
All right. Okay. So here's the way we start trying to get our families to understand what's happening to our loved ones. Because remember, your person with dementia does not look physically sick here until they have lost about a pound of brain tissue. So let me say that again. You and I have a 3-pound brain. Dementias destroy brain cells. The brain function becomes altered because the brain mass itself is getting smaller and smaller and smaller for reasons we don't understand. In other illnesses, you look sick, but in dementia, you don't look sick until a third of the weight of the brain is gone. So your loved one has significant brain tissue, but still looks well. And because of that, people think that everything with them is okay. So let's start thinking about how their memory is impacted and how you can trace that and understand where your loved one is and why they're acting the way they're behaving. So start by thinking of every memory you have as being a file. And then think of your brain as the file cabinet. Now, I normally use a driving analogy to help people. And since y'all are in Colorado, this is especially effective for y'all. As you sit there today, think to yourself, can you drive in rain? First of all, can you drive? So that's one file, is a file on how to drive a vehicle. File number 2 is, can you drive in rain? File number 3 is, can you drive in snow? And I'm willing to bet every single one of you raised your hand. The next one is, can you drive in ice? And I'm willing to bet as Coloradans, yes, you can, even though your brain quickly said, ice bad, don't drive in it. You nonetheless know how to. Because you live in Colorado, you have a file on 4-wheel drive. Because you live in Colorado, many of you also have a file called 3 on the tree or 4 on the floor. You can drive something with a clutch. You may be able to back a trailer or back an RV. You may be able to drive a snowmobile, a tractor, a riding lawnmower. Think about all of the files on driving that you have, and think about the files on driving somebody from New York City who's never been anywhere near the front seat of a vehicle has. So think about everything you know as having a file, and think about the brain being the file cabinet. Now, some of us have very organized files. Your files are terribly, terribly organized. Lindsay, I'm sad to report some people don't have good files at all. Now, I picked this file in particular because it makes me think of a mom with a whole bunch of kids, because each one of these files, I don't know if you can see it, actually has the name of a person in it. And if you look closely, we need to really probably, I don't know, have a moment of silence for Ron, because Ron's actually got a voodoo doll with a pin stuck in his file. So some of us are organized, some files not so organized. Other things that we need to remember about our files are that our files are interconnected. And just because something starts in one area of a file doesn't mean it doesn't end way up on the other side of the brain in a completely different file, but there's still a connectivity there. So let's think about the word bananas. You can eat a banana, you can go banana. Banana is one of the first foods you and I had. They fed it to us out of a little jar, and we liked it because it's sweet. It was mushy. We could eat it. It was no problem. And then you begin to peel the banana and you begin to give the child a little piece of banana. And that was even better. We could squish it in our hands and then eat it. It was fabulous. The banana was wonderful. Didn't have to have teeth, didn't require a great deal of dexterity, because it didn't matter what you did to it, you still had banana. Then you begin to learn banana came in a peel. Then there were cartoons where you could slip on a banana peel. There's a banana color. Bananas are also liked by other things. I have a dog that likes a banana, but I first learned that monkeys like a banana. And because I grew up in the 60s, I found out that there was a television show with a group of people called Monkeys. So there were 2 connections between monkeys, and both were bananas, but they were different kinds of bananas. You can have a banana seat bike. You can have a banana frozen. You can have a banana frozen and dipped in chocolate. You can have banana bread. You can make banana foster. You can make banana dessert. You can buy it, fry it. You can bake it. You can do all sorts of things with banana, and even at the end of life, still no teeth required. So Lindsay, do you see how our files, our memories are in our files, and some of those files have great connectivity, and some of those files have remote connectivity? Then those files are in different places in the brain or the file cabinet. Does that make sense, Lindsay?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay, if Lindsay says yes, then I simply must move forward. So here's our file cabinet. Our file cabinet started in the moment of birth. The first person that you actually met was your mom. The doctor wasn't there to meet you. They were just there to make sure everything happened okay. The nurse was there to dry you off. The first person you met was mom. When mom and dad left the hospital, they brought you home. When you got home, you began to meet people. You met siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. People came to meet you the day you were born. Almost immediately, you begin to learn social skills. And Lindsay, this was reinforced for me back in March. My 19th great niece was born. And I went to see her a week after she had arrived home. And as I left, her mother held her up, took her hand, and said, "Wave goodbye to Aunt Tam." Our social skills start at the moment of birth. If you are male, your hand was shook the day you were born. Male bonding started. Hello, how are you? At home, you begin to learn social skills like please and thank you, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. At around the age of 2, you actually begin to learn the social conversation. And Lindsay, the social conversation is, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. How's your family? My family's fine. How's yours? How's work? Work is fine. How's yours? Oh, mine is fine. How's the weather? The weather is fine. That is the social conversation. Your loved one has been doing it since they were a toddler. The problem is people hear the social conversation and think it means cognition, and it doesn't. It is simply a very, very old memory that you and I have recited a million times. You begin to learn the activities of daily living, transfer, the first milestone of child development. Your baby turned itself over. Then you begin to learn ambulation, toileting. Bathing was the big one, Lindsay. Bathing takes until the child is 8 or 9 or 10 before they safely and correctly can bathe, with the water being the right temperature and doing everything that's required. And you begin to learn your church or your spiritual beliefs. You begin to learn singing, and you begin to learn cursing. So mom and dad sent you to school. You went to school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. You played a bunch of ball games. You might have learned a musical instrument. You had your first love and your first kiss. Now, some of you learned to drive when you were 14, 15, 16, 17. I grew up on a ranch, Lindsay. I began to drive when I was 3 and 4. Who do you think is going to be harder to take the car keys away from? Somebody who started driving when they were in their teens, or somebody who started driving when they were 4?
I'm going to go with 4.
You're going to go with 4 because I have more memory of me driving. Therefore, those keys have been something that in my brain have always been there, and it makes sense to me. You finished high school. Mom and dad said, we love you, but you can't stay here. You went out into the world. You either joined the military, you went to college, you got a job. Think back to your very first apartment and stop and think for a moment, would you even live there again? And then wonder, why did your mother send you to such a terrible place? But you got out into the world, Lindsay. You made new friends, new social groups. You found an apartment you liked. You found a house you loved. You met someone you fell in love. You got married. You had children. From the children come the grandchildren. From the grandchildren come the great-grandchildren. And now we're at retirement. And suddenly something seems wrong with your loved one. And so one of the things that families will notice is that things happened in 2005 that changed us. And the two things that happened were suddenly everybody could get a giant flat screen TV. They stopped being thousands of dollars and they became hundreds of dollars. They all came with a remote control. For the first time, all of us had no choice but to have a remote control. And in 2005, cell phones came out in mass, and we began to turn off landlines. So people with dementia will come up to you with a cell phone and hand it to you and tell you there's something wrong with it. It's broken. It won't turn the TV on. And they'll come back a few minutes later with the remote control and tell you there's something broken with this remote control. It won't call their daughter. And that's called agnosia, the inability to recognize common objects or people. They're both flat. They both have numbers on them. You do something with them, they fit in your hand, but they're two completely different things. As dementia begins and your loved one needs rehab, a lot of times, Lindsay, we hear about that person with dementia is refusing to do rehab, and they're not refusing anything. They don't understand what you're wanting them to do because the piece of the brain that makes short-term memory no longer exists. And Lindsay, we didn't grow up seeing walkers. Walkers we didn't begin to see until the 50s or 60s, and then that was very, very rare. It's only recently that walkers are something we see around us. Our residents, our people with dementia are, however, familiar with the cane, and the reason they are is the cane was one of the first things you noticed as a child because a grandparent had a cane. So cane is old memory, walker is not. In most forms of dementia, the process is going to remove your loved one's memory in the reverse order of which it was learned. And so what that means is, as the disease progresses, I don't remember that I have great-grandchildren. I only remember that I have grandchildren. And as time goes on, I forget that I have grandchildren. I remember that I'm much younger and I have children. As time goes on, I begin to think I must be in school somewhere. I'm looking for my parents. I don't recognize my spouse or my adult children anymore because I'm in high school. I'm somewhere there. And finally, I want to go home. And when I look for home, it's not a physical home. It's a different thing. And Lindsay, I'll show you that in just a second. So did you follow me, Lindsay, how memory is the building block process that went up, and in the process of dementia, it's going to begin to be lost and go backwards in time?
Yeah, that makes good sense to me.
Okay, now I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to use my mother as the example. Okay, so you ready, Lindsay?
Hit it. I'm ready.
All right. My mother was actually born at home on what is now called Fort Hood, Texas, the largest military base in the world. My mother's family were part of 300 families displaced when the federal government took Fort Hood, so my family moved further west and started ranching in Coryell County. My mother comes from a small internal family. She has only a set of twin sisters, but my mother comes from a large extended family. She had 63 first cousins. My mother grew up walking to school. To get to school, she had to first walk through, whoops, I got to go the other direction here. I have to remember that. To get to school, my mother first walked 2 miles through the pasture on what is called a cow path, meaning a path about this wide that cows use. She climbed over a barbed wire fence and walked 2 miles down a dirt road where she was then picked up and driven to a one-room schoolhouse. In the afternoon, she was dropped off and she walked 2 miles down the dirt road, climbed across the barbed wire fence and walked 2 miles on the cow path home. And Lindsay, that pasture she walked home through is called Copperhead Hill. Would you get in trouble today, do you think, if we let a child walk 8 miles to and from school and they went through a pasture called Copperhead Hill? Do you think times might have changed since then?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a couple problematic things there for a present day.
So caregivers who don't understand how this generation aged are often surprised at how strong older people are. And they are strong because they did a lot more activity than we do. My mother was the homecoming queen. She was a cheerleader. And the day after she graduated high school, my mother married my father. By the time my mother was 30, she and my father had 5 children, and I would be 10. From 4 of those 5 children, my mother has 12 living grandchildren. From the first 7 of those 12 living grandchildren, my mother has 19 great-grandchildren. Number 20 and number 21 are due in August and October. But because of dementia, my mother doesn't realize the year is 2021. Because of dementia, my mother doesn't remember that when she was 30, her father died. Because of dementia, my mother doesn't remember that when she was 50, her mother died. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Okay. And now the process of dementia has begun. And so now when I ask my mother what year it is, my mother says the year is 1970. Now, if the year is 1970, Lindsay, do I look old enough to be her daughter, or do I look too old to be her daughter?
You probably look too old to be her daughter.
Lindsay, that was so gentle and kind how you said I probably look too old to be 10 years old. That was very kind of you, and I appreciate it. If I'm teaching this class in the North, somebody will actually yell at me, "'Cause you're old!" And it hurts. It hurts when that happens, but you were so gentle. My mother doesn't recognize me, Lindsay, as me, her daughter, because I'm simply too old for the files that are left of me. When my mother looks for me, my mother's looking for a 10-year-old daughter, not a 60-year-old daughter. But I do remind my mother of someone. I remind my mother of someone that is still in her files. She knows that she knows me. There's a familiarity about me. My face structure is familiar. I get in her personal space. I fix her earrings. I do her lipstick. She knows me. But there is no file of me as an adult. So she is going to assign me someone else's file without realizing it. And so I become her mother. So the daughters become the mothers or the grandmothers, if it is their mother. But if this were my father might begin to think one of his own children, his own daughters, is his wife, or he might begin to think one of his granddaughters is his wife, depending upon where he is in his file cabinet. It's not actually meant to be sexual. It's simply my mother trying to put people in a file that makes sense for them. Does that make sense to you, Lindsay?
It really makes sense to me. My grandmother thought that I was my mom in a particular stage of Alzheimer's for her. So it really makes sense to me.
Okay, wonderful. Now, who do you think my mother thinks her children are? Do you think she thinks her children are grown adult children who are quite mature and all above the age of 45? Do you think my mother thinks her children might be her grandchildren, the youngest of whom is a sophomore in high school, the rest have finished college, and a bunch are in their 30s? Or does my mother think her children are actually people that are her great-grandchildren?
I don't think that I have the perfect guess for this. I would have guessed siblings.
No, my mother only has two siblings, twin sisters, right. And they're in their 70s, so it's not them. So when my mother looks for her children, she actually thinks it's members of the great-grandchildren group. Oh. And the reason is they look like us. They're the right age to fit those files that she has. And my mother grew up in a huge family of first cousins. The rest of us must simply be cousins and family members. You with me?
I'm with you.
Who does my mother think my 85-year-old father is? Because remember, she's 30 with 5 small children. So who is my father?
Grandpa, great-grandpa.
A grandfather or a great-grandfather. She actually thinks it's a grandfather. And that, if you go back in my mother's history, you'd find that both grandfathers lived with her. As a child growing up, there was a point in time where both sets of grandparents lived in the ranch home with her. So that old man ain't her husband. He's way too old. Must be grandpa. Who do we think my mother thinks my 45-year-old brother is? And as you think about this, let me give you some clues. How many of you know a son who is the spitting image of his father? How many of you know a son who is named as his father?
Quite a few, I think. Is that a husband to her?
That's a husband to her. Now, you figured out your grandmother was calling you by your mother's name. Women figure out, Daddy thinks I'm mama. Daddy thinks I'm his mama. Sons hear mothers think that they're husbands and they lose their minds. They think mama wants to have sex with them. Oh my God, what's wrong with mama? And they take it in a direction it's not meant to be. It's simply mama trying to put that son in a file that makes sense. And the file that makes sense is that her son's a little bitty boy. This man must be her husband. He's got the same name and he looks like that guy she married. So it's not trying to hurt your feelings. It's not trying to make you feel bad. They are simply trying to put us in the file that makes the most sense for them. So you with me so far?
I'm with you, Tam.
Okay. The disease never stops. It kills brain cells every moment of every day. Your loved one goes to sleep tonight with a certain amount, and tomorrow morning they will wake up with less brain cell structure than they had today. It does not quit. Okay. I say to my mother, I'm your daughter, and my mother says, I'm sorry, I'm not married, I don't have children. Where is she now in her file cabinet?
She's a little earlier on.
She'd have to be in school, right? Because she married my father the day after high school graduation. So if she's not married and doesn't have kids, she's somewhere in school. So what that means, Lindsay, to have a conversation with my mother that doesn't alarm her and can actually be really beneficial for me is I can talk to my mother about what school was like. I could ask her about cheerleading. I could ask her about playing point guard for the basketball team. I could ask her about being the homecoming queen. My mother grew up on a working ranch. I can ask my mother all sorts of ranching questions. I can ask her how to milk a cow. My mother knows how to make bread and churn butter, how to make preserves. I can have a wonderful conversation with a person with dementia as long as I respect the file cabinet. But the minute I start demanding my mother tell me what's no longer in the top of that file cabinet, she's going to shut down because I'm scaring her. She doesn't know what I'm talking about. It also means that my person has got significant brain damage at this point. And it means that things are beginning to be harder and harder for her. And it's only now she's starting to look sick. The disease progresses. And as the disease progresses, people with dementia begin to ask to go home. And this can become something that you, the family caregiver, get asked 1,000 times a day, and it can drive you mad. And what they do not mean is the actual physical structure of home. They're looking for mama and daddy. They're looking for the comforts and the things that make home. And when they do this part, Lindsay, this is now the equivalent of a 2-year-old to an 8-year-old. That's the person that asked to go home. So think about, you're a young aunt or uncle and you brought home a niece or nephew and they loved you. What an adventure. They were coming to spend the night at your house. And you got them pizza, you watched a Disney movie, they had a bubble bath. It was the best thing ever until 8:01. And at 8:01, they wanted to go home. Now, Lindsay, where I live, home means I'd load that kid back up and drive 4 hours, and that wasn't about to happen. So I did what everybody does. I recognized that that child wanted mama and daddy. They wanted to be cuddled, comforted, and soothed. And that's what I did, and that's what we do for people with dementia. When they're looking for mom and dad and they want to go home, we have to make sure that their room is done a certain way because those are the things that make us feel home. And we have to make sure that we are responding to the emotion of what a child would want as they want to go home. Does that make sense, Lindsay?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, one more type of dementia. If the person had a vascular dementia that was involving strokes, and there are about 4 dozen types of vascular dementias, the big ones are the ones that involve multiple strokes. Multiple stroke dementia or vascular dementia, just sort of as an overall view in the beginning, the person would know the year is 2021, but if the stroke hit the right place, if you look on the file cabinet in school, it wouldn't matter if they had played piano professionally. If the stroke killed the piano file, piano is gone. Whatever the stroke kills, it's gone. There's no rehabbing of this. This is a dementia process. This isn't the same as somebody who had a stroke that they could be rehabbed from. So the stroke kills whatever file it is. The other forms of dementia are killing the files bits and pieces at a time. The type of dementia a person has determines where in the brain it starts, so it determines which types of files begin to be damaged first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so we learn memory. Erickson said we learn memory going this way. The Alzheimer retrogenesis file, memory is going in the opposite direction. And the name of the tool is the Alzheimer retrogenesis file. Retro is back to Genesis is the beginning. So the file means Alzheimer's back to the beginning file. Now, some of you are caregivers who are being shadowed. And if you are being shadowed, Lindsay, what it means is that you can't even go to the bathroom without that person being there. And that if you leave the house to go do grocery shopping, they can become frantic with anxiety. A lot of times, Lindsay, this gets interpreted by the spouse as eternal, undying love. And what it actually means is that your person's dementia is so advanced, they're now doing what a young child will do when the primary parent leaves it. So the way you think about it is that child that we've all seen, that in order for the parent to leave them at daycare or leave them at school, they have to literally peel them off their leg and separate them. But know this, if your loved one is shadowing you, it means that your stress level is even higher than the normal, incredibly high stress level of a person with dementia. And it indicates that your person's dementia is very advanced. And it indicates that you're actually doing the work of about 15 professional caregivers of people with dementia. So the reason caregivers are so exhausted, Lindsay, when you and I see them, is that they don't even realize the amount of care they're doing in a community takes an entire team of people. And if you're being shadowed, it means your stress level is much, much higher. Did that make sense?
Yep.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, so when we think about moving our loved one and we get scared and they're going to give you pushback, and the reason they're giving you pushback is that there seems to be some sort of primitive brain recognition that if you take me out of this location, it will be obvious to people I have brain damage, and then that will be dangerous for me. These are the things that make home home. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through these. Your pillow, the kind of pillow you sleep on, Lindsay, is what tells you you're home. My mother told me once she'd drive 600 miles in a day if it meant getting home to her pillow. And think about pillows. Industrial pillows, Lindsay, are pillows that are one piece of foam and they're coated in plastic, and I can promise you don't want to sleep on one, but they're used so that they can be sterilized. You and I sleep on cotton pillows, foam pillows, gel pillows, feather pillows, down pillows. There are all kinds of pillows. There are pillows that retain shape. There are pillows that are cool on one side, warm on the other side. Your pillow is very important to you. Think about the last time you stayed at a hotel. They could have had every pillow in the world on the bed. If it wasn't the kind of pillow you use, you didn't actually sleep well. The second thing that makes your home home is the sheets you use, the type of sheets you use, the texture of sheets, whether you like them starched or soft, whether or not you like them colored. I don't like white sheets, Lindsay. I never have. I've always slept on colored sheets. And I sleep on a gel pillow that's cool on both sides. Every hotel I stay in has the same pillows, and none of them are gel, and every sheet is white. And obviously that's done for a reason, but I never am really rested. I'm never really asleep. I never feel like I'm at home. Home is the weight and the texture of your bed covers. At home, I have a comforter this thick. I have 2 quilts from my nanny on there. I use a cotton sheet. And at night, I set the temperature to 67 degrees because that's the optimum sleeping temperature for human beings, Lindsay. When I'm at a hotel, I can't control the temperature, and the comforter and the sheets are about this thick. That's way different than what I'm used to feeling, which is this. Things that tell me I'm home are my chair. Because of where I live, Lindsay, I sometimes don't get home from an event until 4 in the morning. I promise you, before I go to bed, I stop and sit in my chair. It's my chair. It helps me relax. It tells me I'm home. Art tells us we're home, Lindsay. If you think about every time you ever moved, you had everything unpacked, but you did not call that place home until you hung your art on the wall. When you hung your art, you backed up and went, oh yeah, we're home now. This is home. Home is the pictures of your family. I have pictures of all those little people in my house, my siblings, my nieces and nephews, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. Those family photos say I'm home. And the final thing that makes home home is your cologne or your perfume. I don't know what your mom's house smelled like, Lindsay, but you know what her favorite cologne was. And so we're going to ask you to bring that. And during the day, we spritz it on the lamp. We turn the lamp on and the room takes on an odor your mom loves. And that's what home is.